we'd also like to give the next panel, their time, because they are discussing an important topic: who owns the system, power, capital, and control. Our next conversation is at the heart of Her Economy 2026. Who owns the system? Who controls the capital? Who shapes the market infrastructure? And who gets excluded from the wealth creation? This panel will examine the architecture behind power, policy, and financial control. With that being said, we'd like to call upon our moderator, Sibahle Magadla, a development economist, career strategist, and speaker focused on financial inclusion, gender equity, and inclusive economic growth across Africa. Sibahle, are you in the room? If you can please come up, let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. As has been mentioned, I am Sibahle Magadla. I'm a development economist, and I work at the intersection of financial inclusion, gender equity, as well as job creation. I'm extremely excited for this panel, and I'll call each panelist individually. I do stand on the protocols that were observed earlier this morning, but I also just want to say that since this is a panel conversation, I would implore everyone in the room, as the panelists give their contributions, to start to quickly ask themselves, how can I engage with the panelists during lunch? What are the next steps? What is the call to action? How do we collaborate together given what has been discussed? So without further ado, I'm going to call upon our panelists. I'm going to begin with Professor Tinuade Adekunbi Ojo, who is the director of the Center of Race, Gender and Class and associate professor in the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg. A round of applause for Professor Ojo. Then next in line, I am going to call upon Joy Moloko Monotwana, who is a development impact specialist at the Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa, also known as the IDC. Welcome to the stage, Joy. I'll then also call upon Ms. Simbisai Chizhande, who is the Chief Operations Officer at IDF Capital, where her responsibilities span across strategy development and execution, organizational performance, stakeholder engagement, and investor relations. Welcome to the stage. Last but not least, I am going to welcome Nicola Comninos, who is Investments and Chief Risk Officer at Purple Group Limited, which is a fintech group and a JSE-listed company. But what I'm so excited about is that she is also the founder of Easy Equities. I don't know if you guys are investing there. And this is an award-winning online share trading platform with over 2 million registered users. Welcome, welcome.
So your mic's in the speaker center saying.
Yes.
I'm not the founder, but okay. We'll get it later.
All right, so I introduced our panelists quite briefly, but before we go into the questions on, financial infrastructure and what are the issues related to the tension between power and inclusion, what I quickly want to do is to give each of the ladies in the panel just 30 seconds to quickly say, what should people in this room engage with you about during the networking session? I'm leading with this because we spend a lot of time problematizing and speaking about solutions, but not enough time speaking about when people speak with you, what should they be engaging about? How do we collaborate and partner? So that's literally 30 seconds to quickly say that, and then we'll go into the question. So I'm going to start with Prof, our academic. What should people today and tomorrow, if you're available, engage with you about along this topic of financial empowerment for women?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. I hope you can hear me. All protocol observed. Thank you for having me here. I'm the director for the Center for Race, Gender and Class at the university. And as part of that, we've been advocating a program called Women's Impact, Innovation and Sustainability in Africa. So for the past 5 years, we've been navigating this concept, right? And just like Dr. Geraldine said, it's time for the change. So how do we ensure that we stop the continuous carcass of this conversation and enforcing the change? So we're really working with that, creating the network and the partnerships on that. We also have short learning certificate programs, which we have designed both for the executives, the professionals, and also the marginalized women, right, who are still excluded in the university. I have my colleague here, the manager on gender equality, and in the university. And so we are working together with Tendai to facilitate this concept on financial inclusion for women. We've been researching on this for years. We have books on that, policy briefs on that, trying to ensure that we contribute our quota to the stakeholders. So you're more than welcome to engage with me. And we are taking this not only within South Africa, but regionally and globally. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much.
Afternoon, everyone. Is it audible? Yeah. This time? Yeah. Hi.
Yes.
Okay, now you can hear me. Afternoon, everyone. As introduced, my name is Joy Monotwana from the Industrial Development Corporation. And in terms of what it is that I would like to engage with people in the room about is, I think at the heart of what the IDC stands for is about making the country competitive from a manufacturing perspective. And anyone who's operating in that space would know why is it so important that we get past the point of just being consumers of some of these products, but to produce our own products that we are so much buying in the market. So anything that has to do with manufacturing in the main is what the IDC is interested in and what I would be able to maybe engage on with the people in the room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone in the room. Oh, it's afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Simbisai Chizhande. I work for IDF Capital. IDF Capital has 18 years' experience in facilitating access to finance to particularly female-owned businesses. We pioneered gender lens investing in South Africa, and then we used to just say we fund or we prefer women-owned businesses. And then our founders undertook a trip to the USA, and then they came back with this fancy word, gender lens investing. And then from then onwards, we raised our flagship fund, the $100 million fund, Alethea IDF Capital, in partnership with a Nigerian private equity company, where we offer early stage private equity capital to women-owned businesses in sub-Saharan Africa. So our portfolio, we are 61% female-owned, and we've deployed close to 2 billion rand in the economy. So what do you want to talk to me about during lunch? We've got multiple funding instruments, bespoke capital. So each stage of a business needs a different capital structure. It needs a different funding instrument. So sometimes, the sad thing about South Africa is that there's a lot of pockets of funding, but you go there and you are rejected. Sure. Sometimes you don't understand the right capital for your business, for the stage of the business that you are at, and then what is the right fit capital. So what you need to talk to me at lunchtime, please let's come and discuss if you've got a business, if you're looking for funding. So we've got working capital funding, purchase orders, venture capital, private equity, and long-term debt. So if you need any of those products, I'm the person to talk to. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and some gentlemen. I'm seeing a brave few gents. My name is Nicola. I just wanted to correct one thing, though. I'm an executive director at Purple Group, which is a JSE listed company, and Purple Group is the founder of Easy Equities. So I'm definitely part of the team that's making this dream become a reality, but I can't take the kudos for that. That's Mr. Charles Savage, so we'll give him that credit. And my key thing is, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to join you for lunch. I have to catch a flight to Cape Town, but I'm here because I want to empower financial inclusion. That's why I'm here. That's why I joined Easy Equities after working at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange for the bulk of my career, because it's created exactly that. It's created a platform so that each and every one of you in the room can be shareholders and build your wealth. So my dream and vision is that South Africans become the richest people on the continent or globally, because we are all shareholders. So that's the conversation, but chat to me on LinkedIn or quickly grab me afterwards, but Zimkita knows me well, and I'm supporting this organization to help her members of this organization empower their own financial freedom. Lovely to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the introductions. I think they're extremely helpful just to also set the tone even for the discussion. So, Nicola, I'll start with you since you're not here for long, okay? So, we know that apps and platforms have democratized access to investing. So, all around it's more accessible. But ownership is more than about just participation, right? So, the question is, how do we actually move women from being just users of financial products to active wealth builders and long-term market participants?
Sure. Big question to start the conversation off with. So I think, first of all, just to take a step back and give you a little bit of background on what Easy Equities have achieved to date, and it's thanks to all of you in the room that are already clients of that business, is that when I worked at the stock exchange, there were only about 200,000 direct investors in the market, and they were on average a white male in their 50s. Now, since we've had Easy Equities for 12 years in the market, the demographics have shifted completely. The Easy Equities client base is the median age of our clients about 32 years old. They're representatives still of a African male, though, because we've got 43% female participation. So that's also why I'm here and active in these discussions, because, ladies, we can get it to 50%. You can be a shareholder. I think someone spoke earlier about the 50 Rand. There's no minimums. Any amount invested in yourself. That's how you look at it. I think in terms of wealth creation, I think our biggest blocker is ourselves. I've just realized, because I've been my whole career, 20 odd years now, I've been in financial services. I've just realized as women, we don't allow ourselves to dream big. Every conversation I have, I keep on taking myself back to pragmatism. And that's great. I think we are very pragmatic and we're practical. But the gentlemen around me, and they're still in the majority in the financial services. So ladies, we have to build those businesses, build that capital, so that we crowd in more women in this environment. They dream extremely big. So first of all, allow yourself to dream big, and don't be scared to take the first step. So first, baby steps. If it's the 50 Rand a month investing in shares, great. Then it might become the 100 Rand, the 5,000 Rand, whatever, doing investment clubs. We've got more and more women coming to us saying that they're running investment clubs where they themselves are investing not just in listed companies, but in private market opportunities. And that's how you unlock capital as well. So it's crowdsourcing amongst yourselves and others to also invest in the informal sector, in sectors of the economy that the banking sector is not serving. So take that risk. Is my big recommendation. And at our table just now we were talking and we were saying it's so hard though, because as women we're the sandwich generation. We're taking care of our kids and our parents and everything. It's just as the money comes in, you can see it's already going out. But it's that little bit you give yourself, 10-20%. Start there. Just take the first step. Believe in your dreams. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I think you're right that part of wealth creation is also a mindset. And I think as a consequence of the history of colonialism and patriarchy, it's not normal for us to think big, to think wealth, to think abundance when we even lack examples in our own families, in our own bloodlines of that. But I think the point you're bringing across is for us to start to dream and to dream big. On that point, I'm going to move for us to go to an academic perspective, right, of, the history of, financial inclusion and what power dynamics look like. So, Professor Ojo, your research interrogates gendered financial systems in Southern Africa. What historical or structural design choices continue to shape women's exclusion from ownership till today?
Interesting. Thank you so much. I'll start with what have been said earlier on, that the African financial architecture system was built without women in mind at all since the beginning. So historically, when we are looking at this, you will see that the financial system was built on coloniality, was built on patriarchal, was built on different structural systems that actually was generic but not gender specific. Right. So if we look at the issue of colonial property regimes, for example, the colonial administration formalized land and property administration here in South Africa through legal system that recognized men as household heads instead of women. And statistically, women are more than men in the country. Right? So women's customary rights to access land were often erased or weakened. We also have the issue of patriarchal inheritance systems, where inheritance practices, like we all know, goes to the son. You must have a boy child, right? And if you only have girls, then you look at a cousin or, a male figure in the family for the loans or the inheritance to go to. We have the issue of male-centered banking models, right? Where the traditional financial institution assess creditworthiness based only on the male figure. So years back when I was doing my PhD, and I was interviewing some of our own female traditional financial institutions on the reason why women do not have access. And I was shocked when the same manager, a woman like us, told me that, we women, we are not reliable. We are not reliable, so we cannot give you money. We can't give you money. Women cannot be trustworthy. You don't have collateral. So I let her talk, and then I said, are you not a woman? Right? So back to what she was just saying. We need a mental shift. We are slaves to our own mentality. We need that knowledge shift away from the norms, from all the culture and the belief system that has been embedded in everybody. And we women actually contribute as perpetrators to what we're supposed to be accessing. So all these and many more, are what is affecting us when it comes to... So the key issue here is to say that women are not excluded because they lack entrepreneurial capacity. They are excluded because the architecture of ownership was historically designed to privilege men.
Sure.
And until these fundamental or foundational inequalities is being addressed, we'll keep on singing the same song. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much. Very, very sobering. So I'm going to ask Joy to bring some joy to that point. And just, you are at the IDC and, much of the conversation around women and capital tends to focus on helping women enter existing systems in which all these issues are embedded, as Professor Ojo mentioned. In your experience, investing to galvanize communities, economies, and empower women, what parts of the system fundamentally need redesign rather than simply broader participation?
Yeah, I'm happy that Professor Ojo has already started explaining this architecture that we are all a part of, but we think that it's somebody else's problem to dismantle. I think, like she's saying, the entire architecture and philosophy around banking didn't have a woman in mind and didn't expect that women would have to be playing the kind of role that they play in the economy right now. The patriarchal role has not shifted. And we are, I don't know if we are the changing generation or we are the generation that is just smack bam in the middle of this change. Whether or not we are seeing the change, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that's what's happening. And why I say that is because the numbers are suggesting that women are in the room. But women are signing the same proposals that are excluding other women. Women are perpetuating the same, like Professor Ojo was saying now, a woman is looking at an application but is expecting somebody else to go and change that system that is excluding a woman. So I think those are the structural issues that we have. And then second to that is that unfortunately or fortunately, because somebody must raise the kids, we have the added burden of ensuring that these kids that we bear should be raised by someone. So time poverty is not some abstract thing that's happening out there. It's a very real challenge of a lot of women when they have to choose entrepreneurship as a journey. It's a very lonely journey, it's a very costly journey, and it's a journey that oftentimes doesn't pay the dividend that you hope it would as quickly as you hope it will. So now we talk about the funding. When we come to funding, there are a lot of things that we take for granted around what we're asking of a client, right? I mean, personally, my very first professional job, I worked for Investec. And for some people, maybe it's easy to just walk up to your male counterpart and speak to them, especially if they're white. I wouldn't do that. So that means that even your social ecosystem is very limited to a very limited number of people, a number of opportunities that are open to you, the kind of conversations that are happening in the golf course. You are self-excluding, not because you can't, but because I don't know what we need, but there's something that we don't have innately that we need to force ourselves to do. I was reading something somewhere and someone was saying we need to stop saying we need to be authentic, because sometimes being authentic means you don't force yourself to do the hard stuff. So being inauthentic sometimes is forcing yourself to have a conversation with a person that you wouldn't have a conversation with typically, so that you now are in a room where you wouldn't typically be, where these opportunities are being discussed. Something else is what she alluded to around, if you come to us and we say we need own contribution, what does that look like when you need to go request your husband to take your family home as security to this loan in your business? We haven't figured out how to navigate the nuances of what it means not only to just be a new entrant into the market, but a new entrant without capital, without social equity, without the same agency as your counterparts that are expected to do the same. And now for you, it's not the same. It's actually the same and beyond, because you do not have a lot of the by the way things that we assume that you have. And I think that's where critically, as financiers, we really need to be honest about whether or not this infrastructure that we have built and we protect so much, is it benefiting the gender dividend that we are seeking? Because everyone wants the woman, but very few people and businesses and organizations are investing in the kind of work that is required to get that woman fundable. Because when I come to you and I say, I need your business plan, I need your financials, I'm assuming that you've got so many building blocks in place that I didn't participate in the building of those building blocks. And I think that's where we are finding, if we are going to make a difference in this space, is for us to build that infrastructure with that kind of woman who's excluded in mind, as opposed to building it for the woman that's already in the room. Because those deals are doable. Those are the deals that we're seeing. But the deals that are going to actually catapult this economy are the deals that require a lot more preparation. And that shouldn't be just the government's job. It's everybody's job.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. I think it's quite interesting. So I've done a bit of research on gender pay gaps as well as motherhood penalties, and the conversation is that most of the time women will then self-select out of certain sectors, positions, or strategic areas of leadership because it's just too hard. You literally have to be inauthentic, and force matters. And I think the call to action there already is to be the people who normalize forcing matters. Okay, I'm going to segue to you, Simbisai, because you mentioned that your team at IDF Capital even, brought the term of gender lens investing into the Southern African context, so to speak. So the question here is that we've expanded the language of financial inclusion significantly, yes, but inclusion is not the same as control. Okay, where do you, in your work, see the biggest gap between access to capital versus actual power over that capital?
Thank you so much. I think I might need to just make you understand the space that we work in. So we are almost like financial intermediaries, so they are the investors, we sit in the middle, and then they are the investee companies that we give money to. So as long as the owners of the capital do not have a mindset to support, access to finance to women, then it becomes a very difficult conversation because to some extent they shape our mandates, our investment mandates. So they actually hold the power. So what needs to happen is that we need to also have women who are sitting with the capital allocators. You need to have more women who are sitting in investment committees that make decisions to say which allocations go to funds, that are specifically targeting women. I think we've seen a lot of women-owned funds coming on board. I think I see Shluba in the room. She's doing great work. I think there's also many other fund managers that are coming on board. I think SAFCA was very intentional in terms of creating a program that supported upcoming or emerging female-owned fund managers, because that in itself then shifts the conversation. Sometimes you have women just defined as underlying beneficiaries, because that keeps you at the bottom of the pyramid. We need to own the entire value chain of capital flows. We need, so if you go to most conferences, you actually see there's a lot of women, but in those conferences, there's also a lot of talk, There's no call to action, there's no practical steps to take post the conference. But if you go to other conferences where big checks are written, recently there was the South African Investment Conference in Sandton. The number of participants there, I think 2/3 were male. If you go to a SAFCA conference, there's a lot of males in the room. Yep. If you go to the mining indaba, so we're talking about strategic sectors where big deals are being made, where big capital is moving between different corporates. So unless if we find our voice at those conferences, unless if we find our voices at those tables, then the shift is going to be happening, but at such a snail pace of change. So in terms of the power, I think I've already defined that we need to dismantle the value chain of capital flow. We need to have women sitting at boards, women making decisions. And sometimes when people are measuring inclusivity in boards, they actually just measure the number of women in the board, but they don't hold any meaningful influential position. They are not chairman of they are not, even if you are a female and you're chairing a board, you're still called a chairman, meaning that there's already an existing bias or stereotyping that a chair should be a man. They don't chair the risk committees, they don't chair the social and ethics, because it's considered a softer skill. So we should be able to position ourselves to be in those positions where actual decisions that will influence the flow of capital in the value chain is made. And I like your question says that we have changed the language of financial inclusion. So a few years ago, I was doing a course, one of the renowned development finance masters with the renowned university in South Africa. And then we had a winter school, which was called Strategic Financial Inclusion. So given my work, I went there very excited. Then in day 2, I realized that for them, the definition of financial inclusion is owning a bank account. So I was seized with the question to say, okay, I own a bank account, so what?
Hey.
So I kept on asking the lecturers to say, okay, I go and open a bank account, then you tick the box to say, we have achieved 98% of financial inclusion in South Africa. But then a bank account for me, if I open it and if it remains open, if I open it 100 rands today, if I go back next month, I've got minus 10 rand because the 100 rand is going to charges. So for me, financial inclusion has to translate to economic empowerment. Owning a bank account alone, I think it's high time we move away from that narrative and move to say, do we have mechanisms, do we have financial products that land in women's hands? Because also research by UN shows that women invest 90% of their income back into their families and their communities, men 30 to 40%. Maybe they've got multiple families where they can give 30. That's another viewpoint. But I think it's very important to know that if we empower the woman, we can really, really cause a shift in the economic environment of our African economies.
Thank you so much for that. Very informative. We're going to take one more round from the panelists before we open up Q&A. So I'm going to bring it back to you, Nicola, because you spoke a lot about, women also just having to, be more confident and be more, I guess, believe that they too can be wealth creation builders. But I think also we can be as confident as we want to, knock on all the doors, but if the system still keeps the door shut for us, it's still really hard. So the question for you here is, what role can financial product design play in redistributing this power? And what innovations are still missing if we are serious about changing who is actually building generational wealth?
Very good question. Thank you. So one of the reasons I was only able to join a little bit later today is that I was busy listing one of those products this morning at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We've listed 3 active ETFs. And what an active ETF is exactly what you're talking to. So women tend to be more conservative in our investment approach. And we've looked at our data at Easy Equities, and the female investors on our platform don't want to buy individual shares. So what we've done is we've focused then on the exchange-traded funds because it gives them a whole basket of shares and they can diversify the way they want to. Their risk appetite is around diversification, so we focus on that product line. So we've listed 3 of those this morning, and women like to be focused on targeting inflation plus. So we've listed 3 funds that are CPI, which is the baseline inflation in South Africa, but targeting inflation plus 3, inflation plus 5, inflation plus 7. So I'm putting it like this because it's the risk ranges. So inflation plus 3, 5, 7. And then as a woman, you can choose where you want to invest in those. But it gives you one thing to buy, not too overcomplicated, because we're running households, we're running kids' schedules, we're running our parents' lives. And we need to just have one-stop shop, invest in something, and it gives you that diversification. So I'm very proud to say that those products are coming to market, and we're seeing a big change in the shift on the stock exchange to these types of products getting a lot more investment allocation. It's actually happened globally already in the US. In the USA, active ETFs are a big product line. So that's the one point I wanted to make. I think the second point I wanted to make, just talking to the concept of a chair. So I am the chair of the Institute of Risk Management of South Africa, and I'm also a board member at CFA South Africa Society. And I think the point you made around being deliberate in those circles is extremely important. So being deliberate in influential circles like Institute Risk Management South Africa and CFA, by making sure that we do knock on the doors. I'm not convinced we knock enough. I can tell you now, out of every 10 people that approach me to mentor them, 8 of them are boys, men. The women aren't knocking. So I want us to challenge the female leaders, to challenge them to say, step up, ask the question. Don't be worried because you're scared you're going to get a no answer. I'm not convinced we knock enough on doors. Sponsoring each other is extremely important. Supporting each other is extremely important. So in that product design, structure, and ecosystem, let's make sure where we are represented, that we pull others with us. So I'm a big, big proponent on sponsorship, and let me leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on the launch of the financial product. This is amazing. I'll now hand over to Professor Ojo with this question is, if, and this is totally up to you based on obviously your research and what you see working and what's not working, if we were to redesign Africa's financial architecture through a feminist political economy lens, who or what would look fundamentally different?
Yeah, I'm laughing, pardon me, because I'm taking from what she has said. We are swamped with this, I call it the colorful taxes, right? Women are swamped with the black taxes, the blue, the pink, with all the responsibilities that we usually find ourselves. But as my co-panelists have been highlighting, the most important thing about feminist political approach, right, is that it asks us to move beyond access to finance and instead redesign the rules that governs the system. The rules that governs the ownership in itself, the rules that governs the value system, and the rules that governs power. So if we are to look at how this will look like, if we are able to redesign this financial architecture, the first thing will be the ownership-centered finance, where we are prioritizing women for ownership of land. For housing, many buy houses, but along the line, it falls out again. Productive assets, like they have said, and having the right equity within the system. Also looking at the public guarantees and the collateral alternatives that will favor women in itself. Also on the concept of the recognition of care economy, we need to look at the integration of unpaid care work into economic policy.
Sure.
Looking at investment in childcare, which we obviously find ourselves in, health care, simple health care.
Yes.
In water, in energy infrastructure, because that is what the global world is going into right now. The impact of climate change in itself, and how this is reducing women's time poverty, like she has been talking about. Also, if we are to redesign this, it can also help us to achieve a gender-responsive public finance, right? Where we redesign, or we give a new term into budgets in itself, taxation, like we have said, and procurement systems that will help to redistribute, these resources. Having a democratic-led governance. So, back to what she was saying, the research we did years back, South Africa currently is on the 18th level on the Global Gender Index, right? And one of the reasons why we are there is because, to some extent, women financial inclusion, right? It's almost gender, the percentage, right? It's higher than other African countries. However, the question is, do we have an active financial inclusion or a dormant financial inclusion? Because most women only have dormant accounts, like she has said, and not active accounts. And these are the things that is being sidelined and overlooked. And because of that, women are not interested in this long-term investment, right? And these are what we are looking into. The issue of transformative digital finance, how do they assess this? Till now, we found ourselves in this sudden digitalized economy suddenly after COVID. And the people that are still excluded is still women, especially the middle age, from the age of 30 to 60, who have never found themselves with digitalization before, and they're still excluded. Some of us got help because we are working in corporate environments. But what about those who are there in the informal sector? And that is the reason for this. How do we translate inclusion into ownership? How do we translate inclusion into women having power? How do we translate inclusion into women having control and be part of the decision making? So these and many more are what we are talking about. So in the long run, I would just say that Africa financial architecture, right, needs to be designed through the feminist lens, right? So that we can actually ensure that women's labor is extracted, right, and translated into women's ownership. So the question will no longer be, are women included, but what do women own, what do they govern, and how do they shape these financial architecture systems? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think what's valuable with your feedback is that it is evidence-based and it's an African context. And I think the big take-home point there is that if we're talking about feminist or gender lens, we as women need to take ownership and literally lead the mandate, because we are the ones we need, and we can't be waiting for people to give us permission. We have about 3 minutes left to answer the last question, and this is Joy and Simbisai. This one is for you, and I'll ask the question in two different ways, and you can go ahead and respond. But the question here is, if you could write one institutional rule in the financial ecosystem to materially shift ownership toward women, what would it be? Or to put it another way is, what does genuine economic ownership actually look like for women beyond just business survival? And what are the indicators of success? So how do we actually say this is what real ownership for women look like in the ecosystem? Joy, you can go for it, and then Simbisai follow.
For me, what I've realized works is that we want to do everything, and because we want to do everything, we always fail, right? Yeah. But if we were to start working with those people that are our tribes in terms of what is it that we're trying to achieve, it becomes a lot more easier, because as the IDC, our limitation is that we do not operate in every single aspect of the economic system. And we also do not operate in every single sector of the economy. So what I've realized has become one of the biggest enablers of our work is the collaborations that we have, the ecosystem partnerships that we are fostering, the kind of programs that we are developing that do not necessarily have to sit within the IDC. So how we measure success now then does not have to be only stuff that sits in our operating model and in our balance sheet. And if we were to look at that infrastructure that we have been protecting, I think for me, what would make, I think it's the gospel as written by Joy Monotwana. Everyone who meets me knows I say this. If we want a real gender dividend, we cannot do that using debt instruments only. It's just not possible.
Come on, that's it.
And what is a limitation maybe for us as the IDC is that we have I don't know, we've honed this funding mechanism that we go and we borrow money from the market, we come back and we on-lend it to our clients, which means it's only the clients that can afford to repay that money that can be a client of the IDC. Until such time that can be changed significantly, we're not going to be able to move the dial. And I think that's the one thing that I am an advocate. Anyone who's got money, and I say, guys, the problem is not that the women are not there. The problem is that the kind of funding instruments that we have are so rigid and are rigged to not give them a chance, and not that it's a function of the bank itself, but it's that architecture that she was talking about earlier. How do we break that down so that we can have more flexible terms, more flexible instruments that can then deal with developing this kind of future that we want to see? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joy. I don't think I have anything to add to that, except that most of our funds require track record. But how do you build track record without the first and second opportunity, which is also very restrictive even with us when we are fundraising, to say, we need you to have a track record in managing this large-scale private equity funds, and as well as for women. So the system has to be designed with products that allow entry-level entrepreneurs to access funding, which they need at that stage of their business for growth. If we don't have such products that are responsive to the real needs of African female entrepreneurs, then we are going nowhere. Then we'll keep on operating at that level where we require track record. And I think there's also that invisible gatekeeping that is investment mandates, because we have to align. Otherwise, we won't get the capital allocated to us to further disburse to SAPs. So it's a whole systemic change that is needed to sort of like dismantle the requirements that can facilitate this access to capital. So as long as we've got those restrictive qualification criteria or criterion, then, this remains talk and not achieve the desired results. So at IDF Capital, we walk the talk. That's why we launched the the Gender Lens Investing Strategy Fund. In this private equity capital, we don't just disperse the funds. We also involve ourselves in value creation, where we sit on your board, we give you strategic guidance, we facilitate access to additional markets to grow the business. So our intention is not for you to be getting money from DFIs, but we want to qualify you for banks, because we believe that with our funding is a starting point, then you build then the security and the collateral and the skill that is then required by banks, who will then fund you at much lower interest rates. I think that's real empowerment for female-owned businesses.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it from the experts on power, capital, and the architecture of ownership. We are, I think, out of time, so I would encourage you during the lunch break to engage with the panelists who are still here. But just to close, can we please give a round of applause to these women who are in the arena, who are doing the work to empower more women. Thank you so, so much.